Hey, everybody. So, today I want to provide you a quick update. Trump is once again threatening massive tariffs on China. Trump woke up today and, as a one trick pony when it comes to the economy, he's threatening massive tariffs on China. Now, I'm going to read you his Truth Social post. It's super long, so I'll also put a timestamp here if you want to fast forward this part, but it's interesting. So, I'm going to read this long thing. So he says some very strange things are happening in China. They're becoming very hostile and sending letters to countries throughout the world, and they want to impose export controls on each and every element of production having to do with rare earths and virtually anything else they can think of, even if it's not manufactured in China. Nobody has ever seen anything like this, but essentially it would clog the markets and make life very difficult for virtually every country in the world, especially for China. We have been contacted by other countries who are extremely angry at this great trade hostility, which came out of nowhere. Our relationship with China over the past 6 months has been a very good one, thereby making this move on trade an even more surprising one. I have always felt that they've been lying in wait. And now, as usual, I have been proven right. There is no way that China should be allowed to hold the world captive. But that seems to have been their plan for quite some time, starting with the magnets and other elements that they have quietly amassed into somewhat of a monopoly position, a rather sinister and hostile move, to say the least. But the U.S. has monopoly positions also much stronger and more far-reaching than China's. I have just chosen not to use them. There was never a reason for me to do so until now. The letter they sent is many pages long, and I wonder if it's longer than this Truth Social post, and details with great specificity each and every element that they want to withhold from other nations. Things that were routine are no longer routine at all. I have not spoken to President Xi because there was no reason to do so. There was a real surprise not only to me, but to all the leaders of the free world. I was to meet President Xi in 2 weeks at APEC in South Korea, but now there seems to be no reason to do so. So he's also threatening to cancel his meeting with the Chinese president. The Chinese letters were especially inappropriate in that this was the day that, after 3,000 years of bedlam and fighting, there is peace in the Middle East. I wonder if that timing was coincidental. Oh my goodness. Dependent on what China says about the hostile quote-unquote order that they have just put out, I will be forced, as President of the United States, to financially counter their move. For every element that they have been able to monopolize, we have two. I never thought it would come to this, but perhaps, as with all things, the time has come. Ultimately, though potentially painful, it will be very good. It will be a very good thing in the end for the USA. I'm sorry I have to read this, you guys. It's so long. One of the policies that we are calculating at this moment is a massive increase. Here's the part that's important: is a massive increase of tariffs on Chinese products coming to the United States. There are many other countermeasures that are likewise under serious consideration. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And then he signed Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, all in capital. Okay, so if you bared with me through that, thank you. If you skipped to this point, that's fine as well. Basically, to sum all this up, he's upset that this is stemming because China is now imposing a license requirement for any country or anybody using more than I believe it's 0.1%, or if they've mined rare earth. This is rare earth minerals and metals, which China does have a huge control over. They have licensing requirements for companies using that. Now, China has, I believe, 70% of the rare earths trade is controlled by China. So Trump is threatening massive tariffs because of this. And of course, the stock market doesn't like that. The stock market is in free fall. If you look at a chart, it's been in free fall for the last couple of days, and this is not helping the situation. Now, in my opinion, so let's just break this down. I'm going to try to keep this as short and to the point as possible after spending 2 minutes reading his Truth Social post. This is what it comes down to. China does have a massive control over rare earths. That is just the fact of the matter. Now, any country, The United States does this all the time. Any country is going to try to advance their position on the world stage using whatever means they have available to them to accomplish their goals. China wants to be a world power, and in fact is already an economic world power, but it is very regional in its control. The United States does this all the time with things like, for example, our military-industrial complex. You can't export the F-22 Raptor. The F-35 Lightning. Very strict export requirements for that airplane. We also do this with tech. The United States has a huge, huge monopoly when it comes to tech and finance, basically services in general. That's why we have such strict copyright laws and trademark laws here, because we want to protect those industries. So look, what China is doing, yes, it makes it more expensive for the rest of the world to produce tech, because these rare earths are used primarily in tech and military and defense. Now, of course, the United States, if we ever got into an armed conflict with China, this would be a point of contention, because, of course, they're going to limit the flow of these rare earths, obviously, if you're in a conflict with the United States. With that said, about 30% of the market exists outside of China's control, so it's not entirely in China's control. Not only that, if the United States wants to counter this, is tariffs really the way to go? That's really the big question. Or is producing or finding other rare earth deposits a better solution? Now, of course, that is extremely expensive, and because you can't change the geography of your country, where China is located, there are tons and tons of these rich mineral deposits. Now, let's talk about the stock market and tariffs. The reason the stock market is in free fall, at least at the time of the filming of this video, it might have changed. The stock market loves to react to what Trump does and then changes immediately. But the reason why is because the stock market, at the end of the day, does not like volatility, and it does not like uncertainty. China is a massive exporter to the rest of the world, whether we like it or not. And if we want to counter that, we have to counter it by creating our own domestic industry, by relying on other countries instead. But right now, China exports a ton of cheap goods that every country is hooked on. And that is a real problem. Okay, that for sure is a real problem, because over time, as I am against tariffs, and I think that we are in a globally connected economy. With that said, when you have a trade deficit over time, you are allowing the wealth of a nation to outflow to other nations. That is just how it works. Now, it doesn't really matter if it's returning in the form of foreign investment and if your GDP continues to grow, because the wealth of the country that imports more than it exports, in this case, the United States, can also continue to grow. But yes, there is a flow of wealth to China because the United States, as well as many other countries, have trade deficits with China. With that said, a trade deficit by itself is not inherently a bad thing. It is just how this globally connected economy works. And we import cheap goods, which benefit the average American consumer. It is a net positive benefit because, yes, absolutely, this means some jobs are shipped overseas. But when you just look at it, when you try to just look at the data, the net positive when it comes to American consumers is most likely, I don't even want to say most likely, there are studies that show that it is a net positive, even though, yes, trade deficits do have negatives. I'm getting off tangent. I don't want to make this video too long. The point is, you cannot just threaten tariffs for everything. Tariffs are not a solution to everything, okay? Every problem is not a nail, and tariffs are the hammer, okay? Every problem is slightly different. Every economic problem is complex. And as we've seen before, if you just threaten tariffs on everybody, you get inflation. We have not even seen the brunt of the current tariff inflation. So if we add tariffs to that, we're going to get more tariff inflation in a time where the Federal Reserve predicts inflation is going to be at 3% by the end of the year. That means it's going in the opposite direction. Okay, at a time where tariff inflation is a real threat. On top of that, you saw what happened with the bond market. The bond market doesn't like tariffs, okay, and it'll increase the cost of U.S. borrowing and government debt, which makes it more difficult for the U.S. to fund its massive house of cards economy, because that's what it is. We're living in a house of cards economy, and I don't want somebody to, blow harder on this house of cards to make it fall over. because it is just barely hanging on. Okay, that's the honest truth. Like this is a house of cards, debt-funded economy and debt-fueled economy. So when you shake the table that this house of cards is on, you're increasing the likelihood that it falls off. That is why the stock market doesn't like volatility, because the stock market as a whole, this living, breathing entity of investors, understands that we are in a house of cards economy. So you can't just throw shit at it, because eventually it's going to fall over. I don't want to make this video longer than it needs to be. That's what's going on. We'll see if these tariffs actually come to fruition. They probably won't, and the stock market will recover. That's just what happens. Trump throws a fit on Truth Social, gets a ton of media attention. He's very good at doing that, and then they disappear into nothing, and people forget about him. But I thought I'd keep you up to date. This video is way longer already than I wanted it to be. If you like personal finance, world economics, investing, you're in the right place. If this video was informative or interesting, please consider subscribing. Helps the channel out tremendously. It's difficult to grow here on YouTube, but I love this stuff. I love finance, and I want to be able to continue to share that with you guys. So every subscription means the world to me. With that said, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.